Hello and welcome to Nut Time. My name's Evan and today I want to discuss a topic that's piqued my interest over the past couple of weeks. And although I may have missed the initial boat on the conversation, it has sort of re-emerged this week with some new info, which I'll get onto in a bit. The discussion begins with the news that hit a week or two ago that Toys for Bob were now assisting with development on Warzone. So let's start there, as Toys for Bob are sort of the catalyst for this entire discussion. Who are they? Well, they're a small 180 person studio that have actually been around for about 30 years, which is no small feat. They started out developing games like Star Control and The Horde back in the 90s, before an Activision acquisition in the early 2000s. Since then, they've been thrown onto tie-in projects and known IPs, which as the video goes on, you'll notice becoming quite a recurring theme here, particularly with Activision. They developed the Skylander games between 2011 and 2016, and although originally part of an existing IP, it sort of became their own baby. Their biggest break, however, came in 2018 with the release of the Spyro Reignited trilogy, which followed in Crash Bandicoot's remastered footsteps from a year prior. The Crash remasters were developed by Vicarious Visions, famous for developing a whole host of Activision IP throughout the 2000s. Taking a quick look at their repertoire will show you the sheer amount of output during these years. That being said, a good chunk of it seems to be handheld games and sequels and stuff like that. However, similarly to Toys for Bob, they were thrown onto the Skylanders machine, churning out a whole host of games in the franchise over the past 10 years, before finally giving their own break with the remastered Crash Insane trilogy. I don't have any evidence to back this claim up. However, I would hazard a guess that it was a huge breath of fresh air for both development teams when given the opportunity to work on these fun remasters. And in fact, it paid off critically and financially. Both of these remastered collections were hugely successful for all parties involved. Developers were allowed to revisit these classic games in a stunning new light, consumers were over the moon about their childhood favourites returning, and the Activision overlords saw amazing returns. Although these are certainly not Call of Duty numbers, they are still extremely high, especially for what is somewhat of a niche family game. This marked what seemed like a new direction for Activision and its slew of developers, focusing on quality tentpole titles that recapture people's nostalgia, and we all know nostalgia sells. Take a look at the Call of Duty side, for example. Modern Warfare 2019, a reboot of one of the most classic and fan-loved Call of Duties. It sold extremely well, becoming the highest selling game in the franchise.
Bravo 6, going dark.
I also have to point out that a good portion of this was probably attributed to Warzone, however that's still extremely impressive. Bringing back classic characters in a new way worked extremely well for both Activision and Infinity Ward, the developers of the game.
We need to find out why.
Another Crash game complemented Modern Warfare's release in 2019, a remaster of Crash Team Racing, and although it didn't get quite the same reception as the trilogy that came before, it was still somewhat of a win for Activision and its fans. However, hopes were slightly soured as Activision introduced microtransactions about a month after launch, once every outlet had already submitted reviews. Although this wasn't the same type of win as the other trilogies, it was still great to see Beenox, a support team for Call of Duty, being allowed to create their own game for the first time since 2014. We would then see the sentiment echoed again the following year in 2020. The developers with Crash remasters, Vicarious Visions, went on to release a remastered version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, a highly requested revisit to the franchise.
Nut time.
Whack! Me, I'm tight as fuck! And he definitely can't skate transition.
Again, this paid off, as reviews were extremely positive and the sales were great for a franchise like this. selling over 1 million copies in about 10 days. At this point, Vicarious visions were looked at very positively and had truly stepped out of the Skylanders shadow that they were in for the last decade. Taking a drink. Toys for Bob were in a very similar position, releasing a sequel to the original Crash Bandicoot trilogy with equally positive reviews. This was huge for the franchise as a whole. A true continuation of the original style of games was met with praise from critics and consumers. It told audiences that these now retro franchises and genres were not dead. They could be brought back to life for modern audiences. Call of Duty in 2020 was not quite as fortunate. Although Cold War sold very well, it just couldn't match the success of Modern Warfare. What Cold War managed to do in a month, Modern Warfare achieved in only 3 days. Whether this was due to a burnout on Call of Duty or simply not living up to quality standards set by the franchise due to a reportedly rocky development cycle, I'm not sure. Either way, it wasn't as successful. I feel that a lot of people became attached to Modern Warfare with its present day setting, familiar characters and much improved and rebuilt IW8 engine. Maybe the difference was the much tighter connection Modern Warfare had to the ever popular Warzone. Either way, it was obvious that Activision simply didn't make as much this time around with Call of Duty. After all, Call of Duty is the moneymaker in this relationship. Now, finally onto why this conversation flared up again this week. A post went up on Reset Area from a user known as Mr. Grey 3000. It shows an image from an Activision earnings report. The text is as follows, quote, "The decrease in net revenues from retail channels for 2020 as compared to 2019 was primarily due to lower revenues from Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, which was released in November 2020 as compared to Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, which was released in March 2019, unquote. This statement reaffirms that Cold War simply didn't make as much money as Modern Warfare. It also sheds light on the fact that Activision really missed out on not having a large title in their release calendar in 2020, i.e. Sekiro, which landed to great reviews and over 1 million copies sold within the first 10 days, which then rose to over 5 million in 2 months after release. This is a great number for a new IP of this kind, even if it is from a highly regarded developer like FromSoft. The second part of this statement goes on to say, quote, "The decrease was partially offset by higher revenues from Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, which was released in October 2020, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, which was released in September of 2020, unquote." The second half of the statement is by far the most interesting part. Activision's profits are bound to fluctuate as the years go by, but for the first time in a while, Activision had something to offset this revenue loss. Call of Duty no longer had to solely do the heavy lifting. It had support from a variety of franchises, ones that would surely go on to more success down the line if given well-made sequels with good marketing. To sum this up, this all sounds fantastic. More revenue streams for Activision and a higher variety of games for audiences, especially when the releases are well put together and meet fan expectation. The past couple of years have been great for Activision's catalogue, and with the right care and attention from both them and the developers of the franchises, they could go on to even greater things, whilst bringing back even more franchises from the Activision vault. However, this is where things turned sour, and really it's the reason why I'm even making this video. It was recently announced that Toys for Bob would become a support studio for Call of Duty, primarily Warzone. Warzone has been hugely successful for Activision, and although it launched with an immense bang and player counts have been incredibly high as of late, player happiness with the product has been quickly running downhill. Plagued with hackers, gun imbalance, connectivity issues, and the lack of new and interesting content are some of the reasons why players aren't happy. I absolutely love Modern Warfare's multiplayer. Cold War's not quite as much. However, it's obvious to anyone playing the games that Activision's clear focus is Warzone. Many of the standard multiplayer community have felt somewhat neglected over the past couple of years across both games, and to be honest, it hasn't been for the better as Warzone has felt somewhat stale since near launch. This Warzone cash chase by Activision has only so much fuel in the tank before something big needs to happen within the mode. Take a look at Fortnite in comparison. Constant large-scale events, map changes, and a whole host of characters ripped from across the world of pop culture. Anyway, this is not a video where I sit here and bash Warzone, and how it's impacted the core of what COD is. No, in fact, this is a video where we bash Activision. Taking a look at this tweet from Charlie Intel shows the amount of studios working on Call of Duty these days. To me, it's apparent that this is simply too many.
Got him!
Activision are sucking the life out of these development studios and turning them into a cog in the Call of Duty machine. One look at Toys for Bob's social rebrand tells you all you need to know. This news that Activision has placed a talented and creative studio onto Warzone support was not received well by many, especially as it follows the news that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remastered developers have been merged with Blizzard to assist in the development of Diablo 2 Remastered. Again, this is another strange move by Activision, taking a talented, unique team who have proven they can make special games on their own and placing them in a support role. This is a practice Activision have been doing for years, taking unique teams and placing them into development roles on yearly franchises. Sledgehammer, Beanox and Raven Software are all prime examples of this. Even if you take a quick glance at their Wikipedia page, you can see how much support they have done over the years and how few unique games they've made. However, Toys for Bob and Vicarious Visions are potentially the most notable, having both just released very successful games. Another side note that I want to mention is that many Blizzard higher-ups have left the studio over the past few years under Activision's rule. So clearly people aren't happy there. All of this asks a much bigger question. Is this all a huge waste of talent, and when is it wrong to crush creative freedom in the name of profits? This is clearly what is happening over at Activision Blizzard, and it surely can't last, right? Call of Duty is popular for sure, but many of the community aren't happy with Activision's decisions as of late. This also translates to some decisions being made over at Blizzard as well. How long until Activision's golden goose has nothing left to give? It's going to be an interesting year, with the next Battlefield going head to head with this year's COD entry. If rumours are to be believed, then we are seeing a visually impressive large-scale modern combat game going head to head with a World War II sequel made by arguably Call of Duty's least popular studio. I also want to note that this is a problem that is seemingly permeating the industry. As the gaming industry becomes increasingly more profitable, industry suits are chasing the money instead of the art that game can really be. I get it. Games, like the film industry, are and can be entertainment. However, they can also be much more. In Sony's case, a story broke earlier this year that they were closing Japan's studio, a very unique, well-regarded long-term game studio with a lot of Eastern flair. Ape Escape, Gravity Rush, Loco-Roco and Knack are a few of the projects, all quite wacky in tone. These games don't typically make that much money, especially when compared to a more Western-focused game such as God of War or Horizon even. They are much more about the PlayStation legacy that was built upon in the 90s. Anyway, to cut a long story short, Sony are equally in the money race within the industry, closing studios that ooze creativity and talent. There's nothing wrong with chasing money, especially when Sony are able to release masterpiece games such as The Last of Us and God of War. However, this should never come at the cost of creative liberty, which happens to be the case, especially over at Activision. On the flip side, we have indie games. Indies are the creative lifeblood of the industry, pushing the boundaries in game design, story, and art. However, you need these large AAA games to keep the industry lights on, and that's okay. But by chasing an increasingly stale shooter and genre while squandering the talents and creative freedom of developers and franchises is not the way to do it. After all, variety is the spice of life. Anyway, I should really wrap this up. It's becoming quite a waffle, but I think my point has been sort of conveyed. Pressure needs to be placed on these publishers chasing money, as at the end of the day, this will always end up creating a worse product. Thank you very much for watching. This is quite a different video for ones I've made on the channel, but maybe it's a new direction that could be taken. It's just something that I really wanted to talk about because I really love these fun retro remasters, especially, you know, like these platformer games like Spyro and Crash. I grew up on them, I love them so much, but it's a shame to see them being crushed in the name of Call of Duty, which in my opinion, isn't getting any better these days. I love Modern Warfare. It brings back a lot of nostalgia that I had during the Modern Warfare 2 days, but I don't know, man. Let's see where Call of Duty can go and what Activision will do with all of these studios they have. Thanks for watching again. Until the next one, I suppose. Goodbye.